Miami Heat won a thrilling double overtime game over the Orlando Magic on Monday, featuring a big lineup that helped push them to victory. And the star of the game, well, we'll tell you who it was on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. I have a great jam-packed show for you today. Jimmy Butler is suspended again. Bradley Beal lets us know another team that he won't play for. But first, recording this late Monday night after the Miami Heat's double overtime win over the Orlando Magic, a much-needed win for a Heat team that was without Jimmy Butler. They come back from 14 down in the fourth quarter to get their first consecutive win since January 11th, and a bunch of stuff to get into in this one, David. But my main takeaway is watching that in person. That was the best game Bam Adebayo has played all season, and it might have been one of the best games he's played in his entire career. That was a two-way masterclass by Bam Adebayo that showcased all the reasons why he is special. Everything that makes him special, it was there. The playmaking, it was there. Defensively, matched up against Paolo Banchero. The Heat did not switch in this one. They had Bam guard Paolo basically the entire game, held Paolo to just 2 points in that fourth quarter when Miami was making that comeback. That was as big as anything else that was happening in that game. And then the thing that really stood out was this game goes to 2 overtimes, and by the second overtime, you really saw Bam's conditioning, I thought, in the spotlight there. He was outworking, out-hustling, outplaying everybody on the court on both teams. He was the best player in those overtime periods. He was doing everything. I'm not sure what actually showed up on the television, but watching it in person, he was flying all over the place. If he wasn't getting the rebound, he was affecting it so that one of his teammates was getting a defensive rebound. It was again one of the best games that I've ever seen Bam Adebayo play, and again, and so important and very much needed when the Miami Heat, no Jimmy Butler in this one. Who knows how that's going to play out? The Heat need a star player and have needed a star player all season long. Bam was the star player. He played like the star player tonight.
Tremendous effort from him. True leadership, I think, also, because we haven't seen him take responsibility for this team at any point this season. He's had spurts, but nothing quite like the way he played tonight, where he was really carrying the team on his back, especially late. 10 points in the double overtime periods, 6 in the second overtime. The first 6 points for Miami, he was phenomenal. And you're absolutely right. Like, defensively on the glass, so active, doing so much, but just aggressive offensively, looking for his shot, not settling, confident, aggressive. This was his best game of the season, I think, by a wide margin, even better than that Mexico game where he wound up having 30-something points. I think it was just a total effort from him. And it was just, that's what really stood out to me, is watching that effort, even on the TV, that was really clearly demonstrated. And just the leadership, because this is now his team. It really was. For everybody to kind of feed off of that. Now I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the show, but with the Jimmy Butler suspension, it's clear that they're moving on, and he has to take accountability. He has to assume this role. He is the team captain. He is the team's best player moving forward. You can make an argument it's been Tyler all season long, but really in terms of what he can do and how he can affect the outcome of the game, tonight is what demonstrated why Bam has been an all-star, why he's not just a glorified role player. We haven't seen this from him all season. So I can understand the criticism. We've been critical. The fans have been extremely critical. But this kind of effort really shows why he is one of the star players in this league and why he's Miami's most complete player.
And he needs to be their best player. I think more importantly, if he was their best player tonight and he needs to be their best player, does he have to do this every night? I don't expect this from anybody every night. This was a masterclass, but it has to get much closer to this on that side, on that side of the spectrum than it has been for most of this season, which has been really disappointing. But I also think just playing him at this position has sort of freed him up. And
Yes.
what we saw, and we're going to get to a lot of things about what this Heat team looks like in a post Jimmy Butler world, because there was a lot of things in this game to get to on that front. But just watching Bam bring the ball up, be the point guard of this team, seeing Eric Spoelstra call out the plays to Bam. Bam was the point guard in this game. And the Heat kept running the same play over and over again. It was Bam on one side, almost looked like he was positioning for a side pick and roll, but instead it would be Kel'el Ware on the other side, kind of like this really high horns action almost, except with Bam having the ball. And then either Duncan Robinson or Tyler Hero coming around that Ware screen, and then Bam just kind of throwing it over the top to him. And then and that was the trigger for a lot of their offense in this game. And I was like, oh, like schematically they found something with this now, because that was sort of new. We hadn't seen playmaking Bam in quite that way. So you combine the playmaking like that and just him, the nuances, the timing. I mean, man, this was a chef's kiss of a game from Bam. This is, and Eric Spoelstra talked about this after and referenced the criticism that he's gotten, that Bam has gotten. And this is what makes Bam so special. It's the nuances. It's the effort. It's all of this. It was sublime. It was inspiring watching him play.
The Ware partnership is going to thrive. I think it's so much of a relief for him not to have to carry the load defensively almost completely, because not only is he expected to pick up 1 through 5 defensively out in the perimeter, but he's expected to drop and block shots at the rim and do everything. Now he doesn't have to. He's got this 7-foot shot blocker behind him who can make up for a lot of the mistakes, not just from him, but other teammates out there. If somebody gets past, say, Duncan Robinson or Tyler Hero or anybody on the perimeter, it doesn't really matter. You can get burned by anybody in this league. And Bam would have to cover all this ground to go from one side of the floor to the other to try and affect a shot at the rim. He doesn't have to anymore. Now you've got Ware back there, and it makes things so much easier for him. It's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be seamless, but it does absolutely take some of the pressure off him. And I think that allows him to kind of find that energy, the conditioning, as you said, late in games where he's like, you know what? Ware has taken up a lot of the brunt defensively. I can now go and engage myself and try to find another level to explore what I could do offensively and carry this team. And we saw it. It was fantastic. Really good.
You could have wasted Bam in this game had you not played Kel'el Ware or another center next to him. If Bam was forced to play center, then he's got to be under the basket, parked there, guarding Wendell Carter Jr.
Yeah.
Like instead, because you have Ware out there, you're able to unleash him on Paolo. And that was the game-changing decision, was having Bam Adebayo guard Paolo. That's why the Heat won this game, is Paolo Banchero was held to 2 points in the entire fourth quarter while Miami was able to erase that 14-point deficit. That doesn't happen. If even Haywood Highsmith can't guard Paolo Banchero.
No, he could.
Paolo's got like 180 pounds on Haywood Highsmith. That guy's huge. And I'm exaggerating, obviously, but it was, not having to rely on somebody like Haywood Highsmith or even Nikola Jovic or something like Haywood Highsmith was able to guard Franz Wagner. That was a much more suitable defensive assignment for Haywood Highsmith. I thought he did an okay job there. Franz Wagner actually had a better game than Paolo Banchero did. So when you're able to unleash Bam that way, Tyler Hero talked about it. He says it's fun watching Bam kind of zip around defensively and be active. I asked Bam about it after the game. I said, is that, to use your words, like energizing and stuff? I asked him literally that. I'm like, is this kind of reinvigorating for you? And he's basically said, look, we saw it works in the Olympics. It's working for us now. And I love that answer from him. This is what Bam Adebayo has wanted. And now he is the star player of this team. It's time to start catering to him and be like, this is what you want. Fine. We're going to listen to you. And if you believe that you could be an even better player than you've ever been for us before because we're going to play you like this, then show us. And in this game, he showed him. This is why you start Bam at power forward with Kel'el Ware. This is why it's working. This is why it's the future. A ton to get into here. A new lineup that we saw the Heat use to carry them to a win. Could that be the permanent lineup going forward? Plus, Jimmy Butler suspended again. What does this mean for Jimmy Butler trade talks, the Heat going forward? All of that and more coming up next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. Who you got in that game, by the way? Eagles, Chiefs?
You're going to bet against the Chiefs at this point?
No. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, or maybe not so much, according to West. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, Patrick Mahomes, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. While live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, well, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, the official partner of the Super Bowl 59. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team has a free daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter, one stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shear, and Locked On fantasy basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. I've actually been using those fantasy basketball tips. Josh Lloyd's the best. Yeah. He's literally considered the best in the business at what he does. It is worth the newsletter, obviously for our great content, but really for Josh's great content. It is 100% worth it. Jimmy Butler, we've got more stuff, more twists, more turns. The Heat announced a couple hours before tip-off that Jimmy Butler is going to be suspended not for 7 games, not for 2 games, but indefinitely after leaving Monday morning's shoot-around early after being informed that he was going to be coming off the bench and replaced in the starting lineup by Haywood Highsmith. So a lot of interesting things here. They announced it as a 5-game suspension at the very least, but make it clear that it's going to be indefinite. Now, what's interesting about those 5 games, David? It's literally the amount of games they had, starting with this Orlando Magic game, that they had until the trade deadline. So the Heat buying themselves some time here between now and the February 6th trade deadline by suspending him. We talked a lot for the Monday morning episode about what do you do with Jimmy Butler. And you and I agreed, you can't play this guy. Some way, shape, or form, you cannot play this guy anymore. He cannot be a part of this team. And by goodness, the Heat figured out a way to make him not part of this team. He left shoot around early. I heard from players talking to people at the game. It wasn't like this big, it wasn't Minnesota.
All right.
It wasn't a big deal when it happened. He didn't kind of make a big – he just left. He was informed that he wasn't going to be in the starting lineup anymore, and he left. Still, that is technically against team rules, but the Heat are clearly looking for any and every reason to suspend Jimmy Butler, knowing that it's what's best for the team right now, and they went ahead and did that, and they did it indefinitely. This is I don't know that the punishment meets the crime, but that's not the point here. The punishment has nothing to do with the crime. The punishment has everything to do with the trade request and what's best for the team on the court. This is what they decided to do.
I wonder if the intention was to play him, or if they knew that demoting him or removing him at least from the starting lineup would set him off the way they did, and it could kind of free their hands to say, well, hey, he just walked out of practice. He can't do that. Like that's I don't know. I don't know how, if there were any kind of machinations or there was a thought process behind all this. You assume that they knew that he was going to be upset. I don't think at this point in time, Jimmy Butler would be like, oh, yeah, this is great. Yeah, bench me. I love this process.
Right. No, that's the part that I don't understand. Why would Jimmy be upset about this? Is he the only one that thinks he's actually giving effort? I know he tells the media that he's trying hard, but he knows that he's not trying hard because he's not doing it on purpose.
The level of pride that he has is so great. And I mean, the ego it takes in order to be an NBA superstar at the level that Jimmy's been at for so long. You don't get to that point. Like, I mean, we've seen this as players age. They don't like demotions. They don't like being told they can't play as many minutes. Like, they think they can play at an all-star level throughout the entirety of their life, much less, a shortened career. And so they don't want to hear that. Like, I think Jimmy he believes in himself so completely that he really does think he could still be a game changer, even when he's clearly not been the player that we expect him to be.
But he doesn't want to be the game changer. That's like this guy gets clearly upset enough to leave shoot around early, knowing that this organization is looking for any and every reason to suspend you again, unless he's doing it on purpose now too. But I can't imagine that he's willingly wanting to lose millions of dollars. He's already lost $3 million this month.
He's going to
I
get it
think
back, right? In
he
appeals.
probably will. He probably will, but it's still money deferred for a year. I'd rather have $3 million now than $3 million a year from now, maybe. Even if
I
they
think
have to
he'll
give
be
up,
okay.
half. I mean, look, I know he'll be okay, but I can't imagine that he wanted to get suspended, in other words. But I don't know. He could, who
You got to
knows?
put up a front on both sides. Like the
Yes.
team has to do what they can to kind of protect themselves and show, well, we're trying to set a bar here. We're trying to support
Mhm.
players 2 through 15 here. We're doing everything we can. We gave them every opportunity. We just said, you know what, you've been a little bit of a distraction. We were going to bench you. That didn't mean we were going to not play you, or at least that's the
Unless it
rookie
did mean
report has
that
been.
we're not going to play you. And then,
Well, it's possible. I'm
yeah.
sure the Spoke could have come up with some excuse to say, no, I didn't. I thought the guys out
We
in the
just couldn't.
floor, even when they were down
We couldn't
14,
find any minutes for Jimmy.
we
We,
couldn't find
we,
any
we
minutes
were
for Jimmy.
losing. We were down 14 to the Orlando Magic, and we just still really couldn't find any
We
place
weren't
to
sure
put
about
Jimmy
his
Butler.
conditioning,
Right.
after the long
You
suspension.
know,
I'm sure they would have come up with some excuse or something like that. But it's just like, and
no,
from
the
his
point you made.
perspective, he's like, he's got to be pissed off too. It's like, he's got to be able
Sure.
to show I'm a competitor. I'm still a hooper. I want to be out there. And the fact that the team's not playing, but then he goes and posts something on social media where it's kind of tongue in cheek, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's
Mountains up.
just it's silly. Yeah, the whole thing is just a little silly at this
Well,
point.
I
But
think to your point before, though, like, did the Heat do this intentionally, knowing that they could maybe instigate this sort of reaction from Jimmy?
push
And
him over the edge. Yeah.
yeah, and I think they are pushing and prodding him. And when he left the shoot around early, the sense I get is they're like, all right, cool, another reason for us to get to suspend this guy. Very important too that this team does not have any national TV games between now and the trade deadline. So that's sort of what allows you to go from a definite type of span on the suspension, whether it's 6 games or 7 games or 2 games, to indefinite, because they don't have another. So this buys them time. This is clearly a move aimed at the trade deadline. This buys them time. Jimmy cannot get hurt because he's not playing, and he's not going to be with the team, so that the team can focus between now and the deadline on what happens. Now, if for whatever reason Jimmy Butler is still on the team after the trade deadline, you have a meeting and you say, okay, how do we handle it then? But for now, that's the can kicked as far down the road as possible, and that's essentially what the Heat just did here. We do have some more news here. Bradley Beal got some reporting during this game from Fred Katz over at The Athletic, reported that Bradley Beal will not accept a trade to the Chicago Bulls. He says, quote, there are destinations Beal would consider approving. As The Athletic reported last week, going to a winning team would be his first priority. However, cold weather cities, including Chicago, are less attractive to him, the source said. If a team has a losing record and a chilly winter, it won't be on Beal's list. Of course, this complicates the Suns' pursuit of Butler. This is the luxury you have when you have a no-trade clause, David. He's like, I don't like that weather. It gets below 40 for too many months out of the year. That's off my list. That's the luxury that Bradley Beal has with the no-trade clause. He is not going to waive that no-trade clause. And this removes the Chicago Bulls as a potential suitor that can land Bradley Beal in a 4 or 5 team mega trade that brings Jimmy Butler to Phoenix and relief to the Miami Heat. So
We just got snow in the Panhandle. There's no place that's free of the cold winters, Bradley. You got to waive it for some team. I don't know. I mean, like, I get it, but that just basically means I don't know. I don't think they can send Jimmy to his preferred destination of the Phoenix Suns. Like, they're going to have to find another place that might be willing to.
Yeah, I mean, even before, I'm sorry, but before we even get to that point, and you're right, maybe, perhaps, but like, what's now? Okay, before we get to that, what's the team that meets Bradley Beal's criteria? To be clear, I think he would be, at least according to the verbiage in this report, willing to go to a cold weather team as long as that team was winning at a high level. And the first team that comes to mind is Milwaukee, but Milwaukee already came out here and said, we're not interested in you, Bradley Beal. So I don't know where Bradley Beal is trying to. I don't know if he's got a list of preferred destinations. He's got obviously preferred destinations. It's been reported that he might be willing to waive his no trade clause to go to a winning situation. But what's the winning situation, cold or not cold, that makes any sense for Bradley Beal? I can't find that. And if it's going to be a losing team, but at least it's warm, I mean, are we talking about Charlotte? Like, what are we talking about here? I mean, is he trying to get it to the Atlanta Hawks, perhaps? Like, that's a fringe playoff team in the East with warmish weather. I mean, my brother lives in Atlanta. It was snowing there, too, so I don't know if that counts. But, like, that's the part that I don't understand here. It's not a lot of options, Brad. Sorry. Is he trying to get to Miami? Orlando?
Trying to get to Orlando? I mean, they could sure use the shooting, I suppose, but they don't have a place for him on that roster.
No, they're
I
not
mean,
going to trade for Bradley Beal.
Yeah, no, I don't want to commit that kind of cap space to a player
So
like
that's
that.
so that's where we end up with what you said before. It very much
Sorry.
complicates Jimmy Butler getting to where he wants to go. And so I think this is a situation where you look at the other teams that could potentially be in the market for Jimmy Butler, and the Heat might have to start talking to those teams a little bit more if they're not already.
And look to him to exercise his option next year and pick up that 50 million, because none of the teams that he's going to get traded to, they're looking at him as just a 1.5 year rental, and you get an extra year. You can compete this year. You can contend this year if you're a team like, say, the Memphis Grizzlies.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if you can take on Jimmy Butler's salary, you figure it out. And then you kind of accept that he'll probably opt in next year, and he's not going to get the extension he wants. So he's not going to get it from Miami. He's not going to get it from Phoenix unless they work out some trade over the summer. Again, what we've talked about from Miami's perspective, oh, well, maybe you can look into a trade this summer. Well, maybe, but that would be falling on some other front office to have to negotiate that kind of deal with Phoenix, and who knows what'll play out then. But it doesn't seem likely that he's going to get the deal that he wants. And, well, as far as Miami's concerned, that's not their problem anymore. They've made it clear that they don't have a future with Jimmy Butler. Jimmy doesn't want a future with Miami, and so you move them to wherever you can. Now, look, I see a lot of comments, and I just want to address this really quickly, because I see a lot of comments saying, "Oh, this is Pat Riley's still kind of sleeping at the wheel, or he's not. Why isn't he getting this done?" Because it's not his choice. He trade him to goddamn Timbuktu if he had the option, but he doesn't. Who's going to take on that $50 million salary? There aren't teams that want Jimmy Butler, and you have to, you have to understand that. Like the deal isn't there. And if the only deal that's really been available, or the one that they've explored the most often, is a deal to Phoenix, well, that all hinges on Bradley Beal. And Bradley has all the options in the world, and he can say no to any one of them. And he just doesn't, he doesn't choose to want to go to Chicago, Milwaukee, or anywhere else. And you have to get buy-in from both other teams, those players. And it's not something that Miami's just like kind of sitting on their thumbs and not doing anything. They're trying to actively shop him, but there isn't much of a market. They didn't expect that they'd have to be forced into this midway through the season. Their expectation was, as we talked to Tim Bontemps of ESPN last week, they thought they were going to have that play out over the course of the season, and then they were going to find a way to negotiate over the summer and see what happens. Well, that no longer is a reality. Right. So,
and naively so, might I add, but that's where they end up being. And to your point, you're like, to make it the Heat are aggressively engaged in the trade market.
They don't want to deal with this.
I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know what could make it more clear that this team does not want Jimmy Butler on the roster anymore. They are actively engaged in the trade market, trying to find anything. I think they would like to send Jimmy Butler to Phoenix, because that sends Jimmy Butler. It has nothing to do with honoring his trade destination. It just sends him to the other conference, and frankly, a team that you're not going to have to worry about ever seeing in the NBA Finals, because the Suns with Jimmy Butler, they're not making it that far either. And so I think that's sort of like, hey, you kind of exile him off to this island in Phoenix, and we don't have to worry about this anymore. And but I also think that it doesn't make sense for any of the other teams that could be even a little interested in Jimmy Butler to put forward their best offer right now. Why would for the record, Memphis, despite Jimmy Butler making it clear that he does not want to get traded there, that noise has not gone away. The Milwaukee Bucks, that noise has not gone away. There have been several constructions involving the Chicago Bulls. Some of them, there have been several constructions involving the Chicago Bulls that have been talked about. And I don't know that noise had not gone away as of Monday afternoon. And I don't know what happens now after the Fred Katz report comes out. But that noise was as recent as anything else. So there are plenty of teams that are willing to get engaged in this stuff. I do still wonder if Memphis or Milwaukee would be interested in Jimmy Butler for different reasons. But we'll see how it plays out. But it doesn't make sense for those teams to put their best offer forward, because I know it feels like the trade deadline is right around the corner. But a week in the NBA is a very long time for things to change. And a team is not going to put their best offer forward a week before the trade deadline. The only team that's actively putting their best offer forward right now is Phoenix, because they want Jimmy Butler in that building as soon as possible, because they believe that he can make them better. And they need to stack up wins in the Western Conference to try to make the playoffs here. But for Memphis, for Milwaukee, they're not going to have to do it. Miami knows that too. And so this thing probably will go right down to the deadline. Coming up next, listener questions, including, did we just see the lineup of the future for the Miami Heat? I think we did. We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Heat. Welcome back to Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. So we're in a time crunch now. So we're going to get to most of our listener questions. Thanks to everybody from the Locked On Heat Insider community that did submit questions for the postgame show. We try to get to all of them, if not most of them, in the postgame show. But like I said, a little bit of a time crunch. So we're going to get to a couple now and save the rest for tomorrow's episode. But this first question comes from, let's go with Jonah. Is the triple big lineup the new way forward, or is it just for bigger teams? I could see it being very overwhelming, especially with Nico's on-ball skills. Jonah obviously referencing the lineup that the Heat used to come back in the fourth quarter and then ultimately win this game in double overtime. It was Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson in that backcourt. That's your starting backcourt. But then Nikola Jovic at essentially the small forward spot, Bam Adebayo and Kel'el Ware. It is the lineup, David, that I have been clamoring to see. I think it is so interesting at the very least. And then in this game, proved to be very effective. This was the first game the Heat have won against a team with a winning record this year in 2025, this calendar year. And so, and a little bit, right? But, you know, that lineup was the lineup that carried them. The players were asked about this. Tyler Hero was asked about this. Bam Adebayo was asked about this. They're into it. And Bam Adebayo went basically as far as to say, I think this should be a regular thing on a nightly basis for us in terms of our rotation. Basically stopped short of saying that I think this should be the starting lineup. It kind of felt like he was almost heading in that direction with his post-game quotes. So I'm kind of there. I think this is so interesting. It's so much size. It's a ton of ball skill. And it might just be Miami's 5 best players in a world without Jimmy Butler. Like, this might be just Miami's 5 best players. Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Nikola Jovic, Kel'el Ware, Bam Adebayo. Is that their best 5 players?
I guess you could make an argument whether Duncan belongs in that group, or maybe, I guess, is he better than Jaime Jaquez?
I think
so. Is
he
better than Jaime? Yeah, I think so.
This year he's been, yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. I'll go further and say it's probably their closing lineup. I don't know that it's necessarily their best starting lineup. I still think you could put Haywood in there and give him the Luke Babbitt treatment where he gets minutes in the first and third and see whether or not he can live up to the matchup. Maybe it's a good game for him shooting from the perimeter and he's able to kind of hold his own against smaller lineups. But against a team like the Orlando Magic, it certainly seemed to work. My concerns are defensively, and you and I were talking about this before we started recording. Obviously, again, Kel'el, just like we said in terms of what he does for Bam, he does it for Nico as well. He does it for Duncan and Tyler. Like, he's that kind of guy who can clean up everybody's mess because of his ability to block shots. Nico, Duncan, Tyler, all average to below average level defenders at the NBA level. And so that might not be your optimal lineup. I still think you want a guy like Haywood out there, but there are going to be matchups where maybe he's not necessarily able to live up to that. And that being the case, then you can kind of bring in Nico. And if you close with them, that's fine. Because again, you've got size. Nico can handle himself somewhat defensively. He just doesn't have the same kind of ball hawking skills or the same kind of ability to kind of front on somebody. So I don't know. It's something that's going to be able to evolve over the course of the season. I think we'll see it more often.
The matchup point, the Magic don't have a guard that you're worried about. It's Anthony Black and it was Contavious Caldwell-Pope. You're not worried about, like, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson. Knock yourselves out. Like, have fun guarding those guys. We're not worried about them. Cleveland on Wednesday, little bit of a different story, right? Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. To your point, David, I think you want Haywood out there. You need Haywood on one of those guys. And then Tyler Hero does something. You cover it up best as you can. Bam Adebayo, Swiss Army knife. You probably go back to switching everything against Cleveland on Wednesday. So I think that's fair. It'll be really interesting to see. But I agree with Bam. I would love to see this lineup as a regular part of the rotation. And however Eric Spoelstra has to kind of renegotiate his lineups here to get more minutes of that, I think would be worthwhile.
Duncan Robinson on Max Strus on Wednesday. That should be fun. Highsmith picking up Garland and or Mitchell. Like, that's going to be interesting.
Who said you can't have headlines with Jimmy Butler out? Again, going to hit more of these questions on tomorrow's episode. Sorry we're running out of time here. We forgot to get to credit cookies. Didn't even do that. David, hit me with your credit cookies. Just give me the players. Give me the numbers of cookies.
No song. I guess we don't have time for it. Okay, I've got 5 players. Duncan Robinson gets 1 credit cookie. I thought he was great. Not just 15 points, 6 of 13 shooting, including 3 of 8 from 3-point range. Also the assist, driving to the rim. He was doing it all. Only 1 credit cookie for him, although I think his spacing was incredibly valuable for everybody else. Kel'el Ware gets 2. Obviously, the big lineup we talked about, the shot blocking, the ability to score, hit a couple 3-pointers. He looked great. He was really, really good from the perimeter. What was he? 4 from 3-point range. Sorry about that. I totally forgot he
hit 3 of them in the third quarter.
Phenomenal. Yeah, phenomenal stretch.
So that was 2 for Kel'el and 2 for Duncan?
1 for Duncan.
1 for Duncan.
And I've got 1 for Nikola Jovic, too, because I think he provided a big spark, obviously, and he was also very, very good.
2 go-ahead buckets for Nico.
Yes. Yeah, he had some big shots down the stretch, too. And then 3 apiece for Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. We talked about Bam earlier. Maybe I'm shortchanging him a little bit with only 3 credit cookies, but I think Tyler and his steady production over the course of the night. Look, he was guarded tremendously by either Kentavious Caldwell Pope or Anthony Black. They did a really good job of trying. They do a really good job in general. The Orlando Magic do of limiting perimeter shots, and they were making things much more difficult for Tyler. He was a little inefficient as far as his shooting is concerned, but overall he was still steady in terms of his production. Had a couple of nice layups, really good overall game, and a big 3 down in second overtime as well.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.